Hey everyone, Coach Micah here, and welcome to a very rainy edition of the NITOC Daily Debrief. Today is Tuesday, it's the second day of the tournament, and we have a lot of developing argumentation happening in LD. I was able to judge several rounds, and I can't wait to get into those. But first, I just want to note how crazy the weather is actually being for us today. It went from being a heat advisory, to those of you who are not here, it was a heat advisory earlier today, and now it was pouring, essentially, with a lot of lightning and thunder and everything like that. So it's actually really cool. I found shelter in under an umbrella in the middle of the walkway, and I wanted to make sure I got any lightning or thunder on camera because I just think all of that is really cool. With that being said, we're going to follow the same structure as we did yesterday. We're going to be looking at framework. We're going to be looking at different lines of argumentation that could be better or how you might beat them. And then we're going to be talking about the aesthetics, or how are we going to make your LD cases sound or look better? And what about your delivery, your ability to ask questions and things like that? So let's actually start off with the framework. So like I mentioned yesterday, it's really important for debaters to define the conflict of the round, because when we're comparing between two things and we have a phrase such as should be prioritized over or should be valued over, it's not simply enough to just define value. You actually have to show what it means to value something over, what it means to prioritize one thing over another thing, what that looks like, what the necessary conflict is. And that's actually something that the negatives and affirmatives are not really doing. And rather, the affirmative brings up an area of conflict, then the negative brings up an area of conflict and doesn't respond to the first area. And now we have two or even more different types of conflict within the round. And at that point, if there are too many different types of conflict, then how is the judge supposed to know how the resolution is true? And unfortunately, the greater burden falls on the affirmative simply because it's their job to prove the resolution true. The negative honestly doesn't have to do much to prove the resolution false. So it's really important that the affirmative defines what the conflict is and shows that and proves that specifically within the framework to set up the lens for the entire debate. With that being said, there's another part of framework that I think is really important. What a lot of debaters are doing is they are either refuting but keeping the framework, or they're completely missing the points of framework, which actually is pretty harmful to their case. And I'm going to have our special correspondent, Coach Micah, address this. Take it away, Coach Micah.
Thanks, Coach Micah. Yeah, let's take a look at what I'm talking about here. So we have your classic affirmative case, and same structure as any negative case. You have your definitions, you have hopefully a resolutional analysis explaining what we mean by valued over, instrumental to every single affirmative case. We have our value, our weighing mechanism. It's the lens by which we see the round. It's how we know whether or not we have reached the valued over part. It's the justification for why we should value something over. And then of course you have your support through your contentions. I do two contentions here. Some people have a third one, but with the comparison resolution, 2 is usually good. A, B, application, impact, everything like that. So then let's say the negative comes up and they have a choice to make. They can either choose to adopt or reject the framework right here. So in this case, and in the case of the round that I watched, they decided to adopt the framework. They agreed to the definitions and the resolutional analysis point. They agreed to the value, but then they added a criterion. So what does a criterion do again? A criterion is the thing we must meet, the condition we must meet in order to ensure the value is met. Because if the criterion is met, then that means the value is met. So with that being said, the negative ran a case that linked back to the criterion. So using this whole lens. And then the negative responded to everything right here with the lens of the criterion. So the way it works with adopting a value but adding a criterion is that what you're saying is, while this might be true if we're just using the value, they don't meet the criterion because we've added a new lens. So the Negative comes up and says, this may be true in another sense, but because it doesn't achieve the criterion, then this ultimately has no impact on the round. And what the affirmative did was, of course, respond to all this, but he used the lens of his value. So he responded to everything right here using the lens of the value, but then did not respond to the criterion. And what the affirmative did by rejecting to, or I should not say rejecting the criterion, but adopting the criterion, not responding to it, allowing to stand in the room, he's still using the lens of the value, and he's proving all of his points true in the lens of his value. He's disproving this case in the lens of the value. But remember, the negative changed the lens with the criterion. So it doesn't matter whether or not these things achieve the value, it's whether or not they achieve the criterion. And because the affirmative did not address the criterion, the negative was able to get away with a lot of the arguments that were made. So it's crucial, if you're going to adopt a value and maybe add a criterion, or if you notice your opponent is doing that, make sure you respond to it, because the criterion changes the entire lens of the round. The resolutional analysis points will also change the lens of the round. If you shift the lens midway through the round, or you add a new lens, it doesn't matter how strong these arguments are here, because they're fitted, all of these arguments are fitted to a particular lens. So if you remove the lens or replace the lens, none of these points fit. They don't fit the lens, and therefore they don't ultimately matter. So make sure you watch out for strategies like these, and make sure you really understand what you're agreeing to or not responding to, so that you're not set up for failure in your future rounds. Back to you, Coach Micah.
Anyways, here is what that looks like on a specifically written out flow for you to see better. So what do y'all need to do? You need to make sure that you actively define what the conflict is, and you need to refute the arguments that are part of your opponent's framework, either their definitions, their value, resolutional analysis, things like that, and you actively need to replace them. A lot of debaters are trying to respond to them, say that they're not good, but they're not replacing them, or they're not even refuting them at all. They're not touching them. Remember, framework is king. It's what determines the significance of the round, especially for two persuasive things. And when I tell my competitors that are debating for me, that I am judging, I tell them I want to hear significant arguments. I want a clear choice, because both sides are persuasive. I'm easily persuaded to either side. I can 100% back either side. So that's why it is crucial that you have the necessary conflict laid out, and that you determine that your opponent is not meeting that conflict, or that you meet the conflict better. So with that, let's get down into some parts about some arguments on the argumentation front. One thing I've noticed in today's rounds that I've judged is actually a lack of cohesive arguments, specifically on the neg side. There's a lot of different directions that the negative can go, and there were two separate rounds where the negative kind of went in all of the directions. And the problem with developing a case that has multiple different directions is that you become a jack of all trades, so to speak, but you don't ever be proficient in either of the arguments. You spend time bringing up argumentation, but you're not truly developing those arguments. And that's actually a problem, because that leads to insignificance. If you just bring up a bunch of tags, but you don't prove why those tags are true necessarily, or they're just claims without any evidence or real world impact, then you're easily going to be disproven and outweighed. So for example, several negatives did not have a central idea for their neg, or if they did, they brought up other points that were not cohesive to their central idea. So when it comes to the negative burden, what negatives often do is they either prove a balance, so that there's both theoretical knowledge and practical skills are needed in order to have whatever value either side is running. Another is that practical skills are really bad, and then of course they prove that theoretical knowledge is good, or they just say that theoretical knowledge is the morals and the foundation, and practical skills themselves aren't bad, but they're not significant. Those are three separate arguments that require development in order to be significant and persuasive and actually win you around. The problem is the debaters are not actually doing this. They're saying these things, but they're not developing the arguments, leading to just a hodgepodge of a negative case. Ultimately, you want to make sure that your cases have a thesis statement, for example, but you also want to make sure that you're able to prove your case true through facts and logic and real world significance if you're going to have a good chance at being persuasive with this LD resolution. Another key thing that I wanted to address is the differences in terms. I think there's been a lot of synonymizing is not a word, I think, but people are saying that one thing means something when it doesn't mean that thing. So, for example, there's a difference between an ability and an action. Right? Not all actions are practical skills. However, all practical skills, when done, are actions. But practical skills are also abilities that don't necessarily require an action. So, for example, an action is what you are doing. An ability is what you can do. So, for example, I have the ability to sing. Just because I'm not always constantly singing doesn't mean I don't have the ability to sing. You might be asking, Micah, you have the ability to sing? Yes, I have music on Spotify, shameless plug. Anyways, there's a difference between an action and an ability. An action is something that you are doing, it's a verb, I do this thing, versus whether or not I can do something. So the action versus ability argument is crucial and something that you should understand when your opponent tries to conflate either of those. Second, knowledge and theoretical knowledge are different terms. There is a little bit of overlap because obviously theoretical knowledge includes aspects of knowledge, but the overarching idea of knowledge or justified true belief, as you've probably heard that phrase, and theoretical knowledge, which is understanding concepts, principles, and ideas that are not directly related to hands-on experiences, that's the LIS network definition, which a majority of you run, those are not the same thing. Knowledge can exist within theoretical knowledge, but there's also such thing as practical knowledge. You have to know how to do your job. That's not theoretical, right? So some debaters are conflating the two. They're saying that knowledge and theoretical knowledge are the exact same thing when they're not. And unfortunately, several debaters let their opponents get away with this. And they argued as if this was true. So don't fall into that trap. Not all practical skills are action. Theoretical knowledge is not inherently inaction. Theoretical knowledge is more so inability, because if you're thinking abstract things, that doesn't give you the ability to do something, but theoretical knowledge does have direct ties to your actions because what you believe impacts how you behave. Remember, action and ability are not the same thing. I could harp on this forever. I'm sure you understand what I mean here. Just make sure that you don't conflate terms that don't mean each other. There's a reason that knowledge and theoretical knowledge are different terms. There's a reason they're called different things. My last thing for this evening, and I'm not exactly sure if I've caught any thunder or lightning on today's video. I know I've seen it off in the distance. The last thing I wanted to talk about is some more cross-examination. We went over a few practice lines last night, but today I really wanted to focus on just letting you guys know that most debaters are not extremely good in cross-ex. A lot of times it's pretty easy to see where your opponent is going. I think that is what scares a lot of people, to try to justify their answer some way. What you should be doing in a great way to win brownie points, bonus points, credibility points, to seem more relaxed and confident to the judge, is just to own your answers. I love it when people just respond with yes or no or I'm not sure. A lot of times debaters are like, I mean, maybe, but at the same time, my side is still valuable. Or I guess there are some examples, but my side is still valuable. You don't have to constantly remind the judge that your side is more valuable, because oftentimes that's not what your opponent asked. If your opponent asks a yes or no question, say yes or no. If they fail to clarify and they take your admission as a, oh my gosh, it's a gotcha moment, then you can just show how in your next speech how they wasted their time, because it's not a gotcha moment, because it is true that you said yes and the answer is technically yes, or the answer is technically no. And they accepted that at face value without understanding the nuances or the impacts behind them, if that makes sense. So you can and should say yes, no, or I'm not sure. There should be no reason to ramble on to try to justify your point, because at the end of the day, cross-examination is not inherently won or lost or the round. Like, the round does not determine on the success of cross-examination. Sometimes it does. And if you want to learn how to be really good at cross-examination, or to learn how to ask sneaky questions, as I like to call them, unassuming questions that don't seem like they relate to the debate at all, but you absolutely know how they relate to the debate. If you want to learn how to do that, and then please let me know, because I want to make sure I have enough of you that are needing that help, and I want to be able to develop a resource for theoretical knowledge for you. I will say, trying to get good lighting is definitely hurting my knees and my ankles as I'm constantly shifting my position in order to make sure that you guys can see me. But ultimately, what I want to say is you guys are doing really, really well. There's always some kinks, there's always some room for growth. I'm here for you. If you want any coaching or you have any questions, if I've judged you or not, come up to me and ask a question. I would love to be able to help you as much as I can. Yes, obviously I have siblings competing. I want them to succeed. I want my club to succeed, but I want you to succeed as well. Whoever's watching this, I want you to succeed. So if you want any help, or you have any ideas, or you want to practice argument, you want to run through some drills, come and find me. I'd love to help you out if I'm available. Anyways, that's all the time that I have tonight. I hope I addressed everything. Honestly, trying to get this good shot and just sitting in the rain is surreal. I really love it. It's a great aesthetic. But yeah, I will see you in tomorrow's video. Stay dry and make sure you get some good sleep. Have a good night. Hey everyone, Coach Micah here. I realized as I was editing this video that tomorrow out rounds start, and you won't be seeing another video until after that has already begun. So I just wanted to say how proud I am of you at your first making it to NITOC, but also to those of you who will break, congratulations, that's awesome. Don't forget, there will be content all week. I'll be trying to help you out as much as possible in that regard. And for those of you who did not break, I just want to say that everyone is really proud of you, and you know, it's not everybody's tournament, and that's totally okay. God has a plan for the results. It is going to be hard for some of you, and others will have this as an ability or opportunity, I should say, to come back next year with even more fire. Make sure you don't dwell on it too much. If your competition is done, focus on your team or your siblings or whoever you came here with. Or if you don't have anyone and you're isolated, find somebody to congratulate, as focusing on others often helps lift us up out of our funk or our grief, and allows us to refocus on the purpose of Stoa, which is our relationships and communications with others. So just wanted to say that y'all are doing fantastic. I can't wait to see the results tomorrow and to share my glee with y'all to watch you guys break. Anyways, hope you have a good night. Thanks for watching tonight's video.